In part 2 of getting started with BeyondCAD, we're going to learn the basics of navigation and placing assets, and we're going to build this scene. Hello and welcome to this part 2 in the 3-part Getting Started series in BeyondCAD. My name is Sam Lytle. I am the creator and founder of BeyondCAD, and if you haven't already, make sure to watch the first video, which shows you how to download, install, and activate BeyondCAD so that you can get going. And in this video, we're going to go over navigation and the other basics so that in a short period of time, you will be able to place assets and understand the basic features of this new 3D visualization software for civil engineers. So if you have a license, it will automatically log you in if you've logged in before. If not, you will have watermarks, and this will be the same. Whether you have watermarks or not, you should be just fine. This is the welcome screen. You can close out of that on the right. And we're actually going to do this a little different. I'm not going to navigate first. I'm going to show you how to place assets and then show you a few tricks and tips on how to get the most out of navigating and making sure that you don't get lost, because a lot of people I've noticed have been trying to get around and then they get lost and they don't know how to get back to where they were before. So this is the starting screen. I'm not going to move the camera at all. I'm first going to quickly go over the interface. On the top we have the play button that involves the traffic animation. We'll talk about that later. This is our cursor icon. You can switch between single select and rectangle select. Undo, redo. We are still making undo, redo consistent throughout, but that's what those buttons do. Over here you have the file, edit, and help menus. This will exit you back to main menu over here on the left, and this is the toolbar on the left, and we'll go through most of those today. On the bottom, this is BeyondCAD Studio. We will discuss that briefly in today's video. We have our layers and our phases, and then you can switch between 2D and 3D view here. These are our camera presets, and we'll talk about those later as well. We're going to first start on this asset library over here on the right. So we're first going to you can look through all of these, but we want to go to infrastructure and we want to go to road sections. And we're going to find a 4-lane section. And for your project, eventually you'll probably want to import your own design data, whether it be from InfoWorks or Civil 3D or Open Roads or Rhino or wherever you're doing your modeling. And that's going to give you the best results for your project, obviously. But for today's video, we're just going to find a road section and build a simple scene to show how to place assets, to place cameras, and use some of the basic features of BeyondCAD. So I'm just scrolling through and trying to find the right asset that I want to use, and you can do the same. So we're going to do this intersection, street 2, lane 2, and you can follow along at home if you have BeyondCAD downloaded and installed. You could also go to search term and search for intersection street, and it would come up. So we're going to, once you click it, it attaches to your cursor, and it's going to stay attached until you click. And now I'm going to press escape to get out of that asset. All right, so let's place a few trees. So go to vegetation up here. I love our palm trees, and there are at this point around 1,400 assets. So if you have the time, go through and figure out which assets are there so that you can make your scene as realistic as possible. So again, the asset will attach to your cursor, and it's going to place when you click it, and it will just keep placing. And for trees, they randomly rotate and scale to give a more organic feel. So we're just going to place a few trees in these green areas, and then when you're done, press escape. All right, so now let's place a few buildings. So let's put a car workshop over here. And let's do a fast food store over here. You can choose whichever ones you want in your own tutorial, and you can adjust them later. And then let's do that. That's good for now. And you can also adjust and rotate your assets by clicking the BeyondCAD selection icon and using the transform widget to adjust them. You can also go to the Organize tab, and you can scale them, you can rotate them, you can change the location. So if I wanted to scale it to 1.2, then it's going to scale, and escape will deselect. All right, and now I want to place just a few characters. We have over 80, so make sure to check all of them out. So we'll use Brandon right here. So escape to deselect, select the BeyondCAD selection icon. I'm going to rotate him a little bit, and then this is a really fun way to add a personal touch to your scene. You can choose from all these animations. So I chose this conversation 3, and he's going to look like that. And let's go back to our library, and let's choose another one. Choose Carla. We'll put her over here. Actually, we'll put her here so that they have someone to talk to. And again, we'll choose an animation for her. And then you can deselect to see what that is. All right, so you're starting to see our scene come together. And we're going to go right to the studio, this is the best way to present your model. So you're going to spend a lot of time building your 3D scene, especially if you have your own project files and your own meshes. And once you get it the way you want, down here, this blue area, this is where you really get to show it off, whether through render or interactive presentation. So we're going to go to render, and this is image and this video. We're going to stick with image for right now because I'm going to show just a trick on how to navigate. So I'm going to push the plus sign, and that's going to lock in this view. And then for right now, you can just use the scroll wheel and the right click to move. So I'm not using anything on my keyboard yet, just the scroll wheel and the right click to move the camera. We're going to add another camera right there. And add another one. And then we want one of our characters right there. We have another one. And the reason I did this is because if you get lost, you can just always go back to this render tab, and you can go to one of these sets, these camera scenes. And you can also render these if you wanted to save out the image or video. All right, so now you know how to navigate with just the mouse. If you want a more advanced navigation technique, you can use WASD on the keyboard in conjunction with the mouse. So W will move you forward, S will move you back, A will move you left, D will move you right. You can also do Q and Z. Sorry, Q and E for up and down. And when you do that in conjunction with right click and drag, then you can really start to move around more quickly in your scene. So make sure to practice that and see how you can get familiar with using WASD in conjunction with right click and drag to get your scene, to navigate around your scene and get it set up the way you want to. All right, so now we're going to focus on the toolbar for a second. The import and the texturing will focus on part 3 of the series, so make sure to watch the next video where we focus just on importing and texturing your meshes. And that's really where your project's going to start to come to life. But we will go to environment, and this is where you can adjust the time of day. You can adjust the sun brightness, the ambient brightness, the sun axis, and the sun shadow distance. So if you're worried about performance, you can make that shorter. If you want to make it look more realistic, you're going to extend that out. You can also, again, I'm right clicking and dragging to adjust my camera. You can move the cloud, adjust the amount of clouds and the cloud height. So if you wanted to do more of a wintry scene, you can do that. And we also have the time of year and the weather if you wanted to change the weather like that. So we'll make it sunny again. And again, this is BeyondCAD, which is built on Unreal Engine 4, which is why it has a lot of these really cool features. You can also do HDRI, and that is an image in the background. It just takes a little bit to render, but you can use those, and you can rotate those as well. So test out the HDRI and see if that works for your own scene. So this is environment, and now we're going to move to traffic. This is one of the most powerful features of BeyondCAD. And our scene is very small, but you'll see how easy it is to place traffic. So I clicked on, there are 5 types: the vehicle, the rail, the bike, the pedestrian, the running pedestrians, and the walking pedestrians. And I clicked first on vehicle path, and then I clicked create new. And now you just click the points that you want. And then when you're done, push escape. Very important. All right, so we'll be selected by default, and now we can adjust it. Our lane count is 1. You could adjust that up to many more than that. We're going to just stick with 1 for this. You can change your width per lane, your traffic volume. We're going to keep this a lot lower. For example, speed limit. Again, we want to keep that pretty low for our example. You can adjust politeness, which can make the vehicles more or less aggressive as far as merging. And if you have more than 1 lane, they will automatically merge depending on the politeness. And then you can also adjust the vehicle distribution between motorcycles, cars, and trucks. So let's select a way to deselect it, and then we're going to create a new one. And this one we're going to have come in the other direction. And these nodes will automatically follow terrain. So while this is mostly flat, if you had a terrain that you imported, it would also follow the curves there. All right, so we're going to create a few more. And if you've used visualization engines before, you may have noticed that a lot of times there's not much you can do as far as the intersections without vehicles going through each other. But we're gonna work on that. You might notice my numbers. I'm not doing exactly 30 miles an hour, exactly 200 vehicles per hour. And the reason I'm doing that is because it just makes it a little bit more organic if everything's not exactly the same. And that's often with the visualization what you're trying to do. All right, so we have our 4 paths. I'm also going to name them. So let's go to this first one. We'll name that one south. We'll name this one north. We'll name this one, wait, let me double check. Sorry, that's going to be east. This one's going to be north. And this one is going to be west. Sometimes it is difficult to select the path. You can either select them in the 3D scene or on the traffic hierarchy right here. If you do have issues with that, close the traffic panel, open it again, and you should be able to select them. All right, so we're going to create a traffic intersection controller, and this allows us to, we're going to have 4 paths involved. And so I'm going to use the picker tool and select the first, the second, the third, and the fourth. And you'll see those names show up right here on the bottom left. And then what I'm going to do is you slide this, and that's going to show where the stop bar is. Sometimes it is a little buggy, but once you know where it is, you can leave it there. So south, we're going to have it come the other direction and stop right there. West, we're going to have it come from over here. And east, we're going to have it come right over here. And we want the north and south to be going at the same time, and the west and east. And we will continue to improve this traffic system, including more phases, more stages. So right now we just have the 2, which is the red and the green, but eventually we want to have 4 or even 8 so that you can do more complex signalized timing. All right, so once you get your traffic set up, then you can always test it by clicking this button. And you'll see right here that they only go as far as the path is, so we could have made the path much further. And if you want to see what happens more quickly, you can speed up the speed of our animation. And again, let's zoom in. If you want to, if you're still not comfortable navigating with the camera, you can do this all in real time. Back to these preset cameras. And you can see they're going quickly because we have it sped up. So now you know how to place traffic paths and create an intersection controller. And then I want to also just show if you don't like a certain vehicle in your traffic library, then you can just remove them by clicking. Like this one looks kind of like a cop car. Maybe we don't want that one. We don't want all these vans, and maybe we don't want big trucks. One note is that because this is a global traffic library selection, and you may deselect all the trucks and they still show up, and the reason that is because we still have the vehicle distribution that will override it. So if you want no trucks, you're going to have to make this 0 for each of the paths if you want it that way. So now we'll just have cars and motorcycles for this path, but the other paths would still have trucks until I change that. So again, I'm going to speed it up just to see what we have, and you can see them rolling through the intersection. Okay, so let's do just some other traffic paths. You can do bike lanes. So let's do a bike lane. And we'll just add it right here to the side. If a car runs through a bike, we could adjust that later. And you can adjust the traffic paths later by clicking it and dragging these nodes. You can also adjust them up and down if the cars aren't quite on the surface or they're below the surface. And then you can add additional nodes by clicking those little plus signs in between them. So we have our bike lane right here. It's represented by yellow, just like the icon. And we can adjust the density. We're going to speed it, increase it. Just let's say that there's a race or something, but just so that we can make sure and see our bikes. We'll test it. And I already know that it's not going to work right because we don't have the intersection controller set up for the bikes. So the bikes will keep going through, and so we need to add them to our intersection controller. So let's change this to bike. And then we want to add path. And we're going to use the selection tool and select that bike. And now we want to do the stop bar for the bike as well. And we want it to go with our north and south, so it needs to be green. So that should be okay. And this is one of my favorite parts of what we've been doing with BeyondCAD lately, is once they're done, you're going to see them and they're just going to stop and lean. And that happens automatically once you have the intersection controller set up. And once they start again, then they just get out of that stop position and they move forward. And then we can also add running joggers, or we can add walking paths. And those nodes are trying to follow different elements, and so that's why you see it jumping up. So this one, it's not in conflict with anything, so we don't need to add it to any sort of intersection controller. And you'll see them, they just go walk around that corner, and you can add as many of those as you need. And the same thing with the traffic library for the pedestrians as the vehicles. So if there's some that you want, there are a lot of these that aren't selected by default, so you can add a lot more variety just by selecting them and choose the characters that you want. And the same happens for running paths and for cyclists and for rail. So each of them have their own vehicle library. All right, so that's the basics of traffic. In future tutorials, and make sure to go to beyondcad.com, go to the tutorials page, and you can learn more about more of these advanced features, such as linking, which is merging and diverging, and some of the other, and you can also create slowdown areas, and a few more tricks like that. One thing to note with traffic is sometimes I'll do the 2D, which is right here, and it's easier to place traffic while you're in the 2D mode. And you can just click and drag to move that around. And then when you're done, you switch back to 3D. And again, if you ever get lost, you can always go back to those cameras you set up in the beginning. And right now you see the paths that we placed. If you want to work with the traffic on, you can do that too. It's just fine. All right, so we'll continue on to the creation tools, which right now we have signs. We have overhead signs and roadside signs. So we'll first create an overhead sign, and we'll do the current scene, and we want to place it right here, and then Z to rotate it. So I'm just clicking and dragging to get it where we want it, and confirm placement. And now when it is where you want it to be, then you're just going to change the width to get it the right width, and then the height. This is too high. You can already see our pedestrians are walking through the pole, and that's something we could adjust in the traffic paths later. And then we want to add a base. We're going to add the square base, and then you could also hide. You know what, let's hide this pole so they don't interfere with our pedestrians. And then if this base is too high, we can go adjust that later as well. And then you can adjust, there are 4 different types: lattice, triangle, tube, and the truss. And then you can adjust the pole type as well. So this should get you what you need. And then right now there's just one sign, and we can go and edit that. Let's actually add another sign, and let's move that on the x-axis. And I'm just clicking and dragging. We call these spin boxes with the blue. You could also click and adjust it with the numbers, and that's pretty consistent throughout the BeyondCAD UI. You can change the color if you'd like, but we're going to stick with that 0.16 that we had by default. And you can also adjust the scale. If you want to adjust it in the X and Y, then you click there. So edit sign detail, and now you can add text, and you can say left turn, and then we're going to do ahead. We're not going to go through every feature of the sign creator, just to show the basics. And so we're going to adjust the Y position there, and then we're going to add a decal, add the lane arrow, and we are going to adjust the scale. It's a little bit too big, and the height. And then once you're done, and you can also import your own JPEGs if you have SignCAD files, and you can add your own decals as well, in addition to all the ones that we have added. You can also add a top sign if you want to. And so once we're done, then we're going to go back, and then once we're done with the sign, and we could obviously change this other one. Right now, let's just remove that. Confirm, and then we're going to say publish. All right, so once you have that there, then you can select it, and it is available in the organized hierarchy, and we can adjust it like that. So all of the assets that we've placed, they show up right here in the organized hierarchy. You can turn them on and off. You can also organize them. So these palm trees we can all put together in the same folder, and that way we can shut them all on and off. And you can also adjust the phasing and the layering over here on the left. You can also do glowing, which is really cool for, if you're trying to communicate something with some sort of rendered animation. And then you can also turn the shadow on and off, which is really nice for striping when you import your meshes, because you never want striping to show shadows. So this is the organized hierarchy. It's always available right here. And then when you click on them, you can always adjust all the parameters down here at the bottom and change the layers. And then as always, you can escape to deselect. Backspace also works for deselect. And then you always have to close the current panel before you open the next one. All right, so visual graphics. We're not going to go through all of these today, but this is a really cool way to show movements. If we wanted to show this movement, for example, it's as easy as that. No more doing camera tracking in After Effects. You can just show the movement. And all of these elements, traffic, visual effects, and the 3D assets can all be phased, and that's a really cool way to turn them on and off. You can adjust the hue, the width, the speed, and then you can even choose from a variety of different styles that we have. So we'll go over the other visual graphics in future videos, but that's the basics there. We also have bounding boxes, which we will go through in future videos. And again, go to the tutorials page to see some of the more in-depth advanced features. And then we have camera settings. And camera settings is really nice, especially if you have any experience with photography, because you can adjust all sorts of parameters. I like to zoom in the field of view. You can do the rotation. You can do some cool depth of field things. So if you want to, for example, if we wanted to set up a scene where we want to put our subjects in focus, but the rest of it is not in focus, then we're going to do some things like that. And then we want to get the distance right on them. And the aperture will also adjust the blurriness of things in the background. And you can adjust the ambient occlusion, the motion blur, exposure, and all these other parameters. And then once you're happy with that, you can adjust back to these, which will reset back to the default. And then you can adjust these to completely different parameters. And then this is really nice because you can switch between these in real time, either from the camera settings right here or at any time from over here. And so when you're either communicating, working with a client or whatever, you can switch through those camera settings. We also have the settings here as well. You can display the stats panel, so you can show the frames per second, the polygon count, and the asset count if you're interested in performance. And then you can view the hotkeys and get to know the hotkeys. These are really quick ways to move around Beyond CAD and become very proficient. All right, and again, we have our studio down here in the bottom. We showed you how to set up the image cameras, and then video, very similar. We set up one frame by pressing plus, and then we move the camera where we want, and then set up another frame, and then move it again, and set up another frame, and it will interpolate between those cameras. And the length of that clip is if you push back and you go here, you can adjust that. So let's change it to 15 seconds, and you can adjust it right there. So to render out that clip, you're going to go to Start Recording and choose your resolution, your frames per second, and your quality, where you can do a custom resolution. I like to do 4K, but 1080p will be much faster. And where it's stored, you go to this file and you select it if you wanted to do downloads, and now it will render that video to that folder. So this is rendering a 1080p video, and that's how fast it is, which is pretty quick. If you want to stop the video in the middle, you can. And now you can open containing folder, and you can see that render right there. And that's an MP4 file that you can do further video editing or share with your client or others on your team. And you can do more camera sets. So within the camera set, you can do, a bunch of them. So we could add more than one, and you can also name them. So we're going to call this one close-up. All right. So we're not going to get into 4D phasing and the sequence for this, but we will get into present mode, which is the best way to show off your project. You can adjust all the settings you want beforehand, and you can adjust turn these settings on and off. You can, for your screenshots, you can say what resolution you want, and then you can choose which widgets you want. And then once you're ready, you can also adjust your camera transition time and your touch sensitivity if you're going to use a touchscreen. Then you use present, and you can adjust those you can switch between those cameras here, and you can see them playing up here on the top left. You can scrub through, and so you can see how quickly you can move around. I also have these still cameras. I didn't name them, and so that's why they're showing up this way. And our transition time is slow because I slowed it down, but if you want it to be faster, you can speed that up. We have our settings. If you want to adjust the camera field of view, you can do that, as well as the time of day. And the traffic control, you can turn that on and off and speed it up. And then LOD quality, if you're worried about performance, if you have a slower computer, you can adjust that for very low, and that will just make sure it runs as fast as possible. And then finally, the last part of this getting started is we're going to go show the character mode. So you can click that, and you can walk around using WASD. And you can switch characters by pushing C. And you can push T to switch between first and third person view. You can also do the same for the vehicle mode. We'll go more in depth in these in future videos. Sorry about me running through people. And you can switch between the gears over here on the left, 1, 2, 3, 4. So once you're in fourth, it's going to go a lot faster. And you can switch the vehicle by doing C. And then you can switch first and third person through T. And that's going to give you a chance to do the first person view. And you can switch the cars in real time as well. And then you can do the same thing with the cyclists. Switch between your characters. So this is the basics of BeyondCAD. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us on support. So go to BeyondCAD.com and search the help button. And you can always reach out to me, Sam at BeyondCAD.com. We want to make sure you're successful with this. And make sure to watch the third and final video, which is importing 3D meshes. This is Sam with BeyondCAD, and I will talk to you in the next video.